You're a legend in the sport, man. So what people want to know is what kind of systems do you use to teach beginners from beginners to like the expert level? Like how do you structure your system in teaching in the ways that you teach?
So when I first started training jiu-jitsu, it was at the Gracie Academy in Brazil, and they're super traditional to these days. Even I'm not part of the Gracie Academy, the team anymore, but I still have a lot of friends that are still part of, and they're still going through the whole self-defense, hoist Gracie style, and all those old school stuff. And I do follow a lot of that stuff as far as the fundamentals for my beginners. I feel like when it comes down to fundamentals, that doesn't change over time. Of course, now you see over the last 10 years, maybe 7 years, people moving to leg locks. And there was a period that a lot of 10 Planet people came out with the whole rubber guard thing, which I think is great, adds up to the game a lot. But when it comes out to fundamentals, that won't change. And I feel coming from the Gracie Academy, you can it's literally the best school when it comes out to fundamentals. So usually that's how I get my guys started. But then when it comes down to as I advance in the program, I try to implement what I call the 3 styles of jiu-jitsu, right? The sport jiu-jitsu, in gi, no gi, and then there's the fighting part.
The MMA part, yeah.
MMA, right? Which, MMA is a sport, but certain rules, but there are certain things that in sport jiu-jitsu that would not apply to MMA style jiu-jitsu. Even not just the techniques themselves, but even the approach to the moves, right? For example, in the sport jiu-jitsu, you can sit in half guard for a minute.
Yeah.
2 minutes, take your time to make things happen. When it comes down to MMA jiu-jitsu, you have to be fast. You're always moving, you're always threatening with something. Even if your initial approach for a move was, let's say, a half guard sweep, that might not work immediately, so you have to rush into something else. So usually, I always call it, there's 3 different types of jiu-jitsu, and that's how I try to go with my class. Even though we are mostly jiu-jitsu school based, you don't do MMA here, you don't have boxing, you do have wrestling, but it's also for all jiu-jitsu. So
yeah, so you're talking about practicalities, you teach them, say, is it if say they get into a street fight or something, it's more practical, you have to move, it's not just berimbolas and all that stuff.
Yeah, I want to make sure that my guys, they're doing, there's a lot of people, they have a different approach, right? When they come to jiu-jitsu, sometimes it is about getting shape. It is about, some of them they just want to be competitors. And there are others that really want to learn self-defense. So if I just keep on showing berimbolo, 50-50, guard, how are people going to defend themselves? Just learn those styles of jiu-jitsu. So for me, it's, I do focus a lot in sports here, in sports jiu-jitsu too, but my main goal is to be able to say, well, I trained Vinny, so I should be able to defend myself.
Right.
Jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely. I think I see you more when I was doing research on you. I saw it seems obviously your resume in jiu-jitsu is off the charts. But your MMA, you've had a lot of MMA fights, so I could see where I could see why you say that. It's you have to implement those things. Taking it back for beginners and that start with jiu-jitsu, when you say the basics and stuff like that, what do you mean by how do you go through that and then go through advanced? Can you take me through the process?
Of course. For example, even here at Oasis, we do have this 2 fundamental classes a week, right? So I'm not gonna be showing crazy stuff that these people are gonna walk in and say, hey man, that's too difficult for me. I'm getting lost, I'm getting frustrated with this, it's not working. So there's really the basics, know how to hold somebody down, right? Some people just focus, okay, let's focus on a guard pass. But what about being able to hold that person down? You passed, and now if you're gonna hold them down, they're either gonna just find their way up. If you're talking about people that actually know how to do just, they're gonna reset the guard. Now they can, be a threat on the back. So for me, there are a lot of things when it comes to the fundamentals. It's one thing they're going to be carrying since, your first days of jiu-jitsu into your black belt. You have to have that on point. And you have to be days is part of to learn too. But a lot of people don't emphasize that. Even myself, I'll be honest, sometimes, I'm training, the fact that I'm one of the heaviest guys in the room, one of the most experienced guys in the room. So sometimes I get away with being a little spacey, not being as tight as I should. But then when I'm teaching the class, it's man, those are things that even I'm mislike on those things myself. Instead of being so focused on details, I'm getting away with being the bigger guy.
Yeah.
Experienced the guys.
Right. So is it closing the gap? It's just the smaller details that you're talking about. If say you are in a self-defense situation or even a sports situation, it's just those small details about really honing in. And when you say you're bigger, yeah, you are a big guy. So, there's a lot of advantage to that. How do you fix that? When you see something, how do you even explain? And
so it's one of those things. We both started like one day without knowing anything.
Sure.
Right? So it's extreme. Jiu-Jitsu differently than boxing, for example. Boxing, there is like a proper way to throw a jab, right? There's a proper way to throw a cross. But the thing is, you get a beginner like in boxing, as long as that left hand lands on somebody's face, they feel like they know how to jab. So they don't deal with the frustration that we do in jiu-jitsu.
Right.
Right. So if I throw 2 punches at you, even though I just swung really hard from both sides, they're nice straight punches. People have the sense of like, oh, I know how to box now. I can land those punches.
Sure, a false sense.
In jiu-jitsu is quite the opposite. You know, you think you know something to have to go for your first live round experience, then you realize you don't know anything. So my idea, my idea of like teaching a beginner's class, so to get my beginners started, is that making them understand they're gonna go through that frustration. You know, when they think they know like 10 moves, they think that's enough. They're gonna realize that's not just 10 moves is not enough. They're gonna have to do 100.
Yeah.
Once they think they know those 100. Now there's 12,000 other moves, right?
All right.
But as long as they can put those like 10 moves together and be tight in those moves, I feel like they at least understand, well, you know, if I can only do those moves and do it properly, you know, I can stick around here. I'm not going to get as frustrated. And then eventually they go from like, you know, 1 month of training, 2 months of training to like 10 years because they went through those, you know, those hardest steps, which are the first ones, you know, with somebody like myself, like helping them.
Yep.
Not to get as frustrated. That which is like pretty common like in our sport. But like, you know, I try to cut the whole like frustration to like, I would say 50%. You cannot cut much, you know. Like
yeah.
But like I try to like make it slightly easier on people.
Yeah. So saying that, this is probably more for myself because I do jiu-jitsu too. Obviously just a hobby. But when you say tighten it up, and this is again for myself, what do you mean by tightening it up? Just closing the lid like a jar, being tight on your game? Because I know people have different body types, like you're a bigger guy. What would you say for like, say a medium-sized guy to like a smaller guy? How would he work around like tight spaces, or maybe even tighten the lid if he has like a lot of pressure on him? What would you say to like a smaller guy that, you know, has a disadvantage as far as genetics?
So that's what I'm saying. Like when it comes down to like, you know, knowing how to hold somebody down sometimes has nothing to do with size, right? If you know how to like, you know, drop your hips, like, you know, where to place your shoulder, like, you know, how to make people uncomfortable, like on the bottom, cutting like the underhooks, the frames and things like that. Sometimes it has nothing to do with size. So this is exactly what I try to work with my beginners, because my whole point is, well, I could just be showing like, you know, focusing like in a whole month showing nothing but guard passes. Now my beginners are past the guard, but they can't hold anybody down. So what's the point? You know?
Yeah.
They just waste energy at that point. You know?
Sure.
Just learn how to waste energy because they're going to be past the guard. They train with somebody that's better than them. They reset the guard and now they get caught in their submission. It's like, professor, and right. I'm not really going anywhere. So
yeah.
You know, my whole thing, even like sometimes when I do live situational drills for my beginners, I tell them, even if you're able to like just hold somebody down, that's already a win. If you can't advance position, that's great, right? If you have side control, you can go to mount, that's great. You're doing even better than like, you know, than I'm expecting from you guys at this point. But if you can just be able to just hold somebody down for 2 minutes, which all you have for this round, you already won.
Yeah.
You know? So that's kind of my, you know, when I start with beginners, that's what I call about like tightening the gap. It's like, hey man, if you're able to like, let's say achieve a guard pass and hold them down for 2 minutes, let's say in a live situation, that gives time for somebody to maybe to call like, you know, somebody to like pull that person like off if it's, you know, if in a self-defense situation, or even call the cops or hold somebody down.
Right.
Like, you don't have to even strike them. So that's pretty much my approach to the beginners. You know, just make sure that they feel like, okay, this actually works.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's the biggest thing that comes to their minds. Like, you know, people think that jiu-jitsu is easy in a way. Some people do. Some people just realize that's not easy at all. But the main thing is for me, is to like in a short period of time to make sure that they understand that this is efficient. Because I feel like a lot of people they'll give up training within like 3 months sometimes because they just go through that frustration. They cannot go past the barrier of like, okay, I'll get better one day. No, they just get frustrated and they quit. So for me, like, you know, I try to make like those first like initial months like a lot easier than.
Do you pep talk them a lot, like as far as mindset? Because I guess, say if someone goes through 3 months of jiu-jitsu, right? They try your classes, and I'm sure they get frustrated. They're like, okay, when am I going to get good at this? And we all know starting through jiu-jitsu, you're going to get quote unquote smashed for about a year, over a year. How do you navigate against that? And also from a business perspective, you know, keeping your students in a gym, that's probably a universal gym school kind of thing, like jiu-jitsu, to keep people in from, it's like, hey man, if you stick to it, then you're going to get good like anything else in life. How do you navigate that as far as like mindset and all that?
I'm not a huge like fat talker, to be honest. Okay. Because my personality in general is I'm pretty sarcastic. So like, you know, once I get comfortable with the student, with the member, I kind of crack jokes a lot. It's like, hey man, messed up.
Yeah.
But I do emphasize a lot of consistency, like I tell them, like, just showing up like once a week, like learn a move today, don't expect it to do like 3 months from now, because if you're not practicing, like likely you're not going to remember the details, like, 2-3 months from now. So I always emphasize how important it is to be consistent. I think that goes with the whole idea of like, in a way, pep talking, but not necessarily, hey, man, you did good.
Yeah. Right. It's like, all right.
I know they did, like, I'm
sure. You don't want to be, you want to be authentic. Like,
I want to be authentic.
I get it, yeah.
Honest too, because they know like it was.
Like, really?
Yeah, no, it was not good, coach. Don't tell me that it was good, because I know it was.
Right, yeah.
But in general, like, I tell them, like, and I'm always observing the training too. I'm not just like, counting the time, like, times now switch. I'm always paying attention, like, to how, what people are doing. Of course, not if I would stop like every single class and correct every single member that's making a mistake, you're going to spend an extra 30-40 minutes after class.
That's true, yeah.
But I always try to observe, and I see the ones that are like constantly, especially making the same mistakes. And I find that even like my high ranked guys, I have a brown belt, Trevor, and he's close to black belt, and he knows that. So every time like he's training, I try to observe like how he's doing things, and he should make some mistakes that would like to be fixed before you even go to the next step.
Especially when you go, I mean, he's inching in. And,
yeah, it's one of those things like as a brown belt, you have to be a lot more precise. Nobody's gonna be perfect. Even black belts, they won't be perfect with anything.
Yeah,
but you're that close to reach the next level, so close the gap.